So the last film that I did is called We Are Ayenda, which takes a look at young Afghan girls who were playing for the National Soccer Foundation and had to escape, and it was for WhatsApp.
I want to navigate this conversation into fun space and
Sure.
everything. But first of all, who's Amber Ferris at a core?
um, so a little bit about my background is I'm Canadian. I was born in northern Alberta, actually in a town north of Edmonton. And my all four of my grandparents came from Lebanon to Canada at the turn of the century. We're part of like sort of the first wave of Syrian Lebanese immigrants to North America. My parents were both born in Canada. And we say like we grew up with a lot of Arab influence that we like, but we were very Canadian. So we say that we played a lot of hockey and ate a lot of hummus. And after we sort of grew up in that way and hadn't really thought, that much about our Lebanese Arab roots until really 9/11 happened and really saw a shift in sort of society and sort of saw like, you know, just this huge divide that was happening between, the experience that I had within, my greater like Lebanese Arab community in Canada, as well as like, the one time we did go to Lebanon and sort of what was being portrayed on in media. And so it just really inspired me and sort of influenced me to learn more about it, and it sort of sent me on this journey. Originally I went to Lebanon for 6 months and I worked with Palestinian refugees there, and then came back to Canada and worked sat on the board of this organization that sort of did this like film camp with Israeli, Palestinian, and Canadian youth, and it was really through that program that I both sort of really got into and connected with the issues that were happening in Palestine, as well as film, and it sort of led me eventually back to Palestine, and it was there where I went, and I was actually not it was not working in film at that time. I had gotten a job with a Palestinian organization doing something completely different. And then was just inspired by what I saw and started and taught myself basically how to make films and made a series of short films for UNRWA that took us to, it was pre 2010, 2011. So we were in Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Gaza in the West Bank, and then also made a short film about a hip hop group in a refugee camp that was in the jurisdiction of Jerusalem, and that played sort of within like some small festivals and stuff. And eventually we found these women race car drivers, and sort of it was like the perfect story for me in that it was really an interesting way to come into Palestine through characters that were very relatable and likable, and through something as surprising as race car driving, and yeah, and then that's how it sort of set my career. I moved to the States after that, and I've been making films. I'm based out of Brooklyn now.
Spit Sisters, right? That
Yeah,
that
Speed
that was
Sisters. Yeah.
like it had quite of a amazing. I mean, I think like it had quite of a impact in the audience because is conflicting area, a story like detached, right? Like you're implying sports into a very like people are so used right now to hear from Palestine from stories that are war related, but like dismissing like the people are going through it that are real people, right, with real careers, real dreams, real stories, same as us, right, like car race by instance, right, and not only like a team of women. How do you find these stories, Amber? Like what makes you end up in how you shape your life to be exposed so you get to meet these people, right, because it's a flow of coincidence of things, right, that like put you in that position.
Yeah, I mean, they say that the best films are the ones that are the closest to you, the stories that are the closest to you. At the time, I was living in the West Bank. I was living in Ramallah, and we had a very good family friend that worked for UNRWA. And I was, learning how to take photographs and film and stuff. And I just asked her if I could go with one of the people that she works with, like in the field, and sort of take photos, and I'd give them the photos for free, and it would give me access to stories and stuff. And the driver, the person that she sent me out with, happened to be a race car driver. So that's how I like that's it's as simple as that. And then she ended up not she raced for like sort of a year. And then she ended up not she quit, and then she ended up not being in the film, but that's sort of how I was introduced to that community that sort of that existed. So and they were racing in Ramallah, and we just like went to a race and saw that there were other girls racing there. And then at the same time, a friend of my producer and I, she was working for the British consulate and wanted to do like an interesting story, like to support like an interesting group, and then ended up saying, hey, these women race car drivers seem really cool, and they built sort of a program around it, and then hired us to film that program. And so that's how we got in with them as a group. And then we just like we were the first ones to sort of be there and be able to build that relationship with them, because also I was living like, some of them were my neighbors and stuff, like I knew them from around Ramallah. So it was just by virtue of being there, and then sort of being in the right place at the right time, and being introduced to people. And then I think seeing that as an interesting story. At the time, we had never made a feature film, so it was really hard. Beyond the fact that we knew that there was like this really cool thing that was happening, we really didn't know like what the actual story was. And it took us 2 years of just sort of following them around to start to figure it out.
Have you um, have you discovered yourself behind a camera? You said like you started like with marketing, and then you sort of ended up like in the filmmaking industry. That must have like we all think about ourselves that our lives might we might want to shape it in a way or another, but being a filmmaker, that requires a certain lifestyle, right? From your eyes, for people who commit to that career, how do you think like are the things like you had to give up the most or you gained the most by getting into the filmmaking industry?
Like I had always, like when I was going through high school and stuff, I was always making home videos. So like making those kinds of films were always, and really into photography and stuff. So that sort of storytelling, I think, was always something that I really enjoyed. And I think I ended up going into marketing a lot, largely because it is also storytelling in a different way. Like it's not that big of a, but yeah, like it's a very like, yeah, like it's a very it's not a very stable industry. Like I was really lucky to be able to do it because I had a very supportive family that like, really, my dad, I think my parents really loved the fact that I was going back to the Middle East. It wasn't something that they did. And my parents don't speak Arabic, like, but it was always something that was like definitely part of our identity. And so I think they really respected the fact and that I was, of what I wanted to do. I think they thought it was totally weird, but they didn't pressure me to, and they actually supported me. And so I think a lot of that was a large reason. And then you have to be okay with uncertainty. I think for a lot of people, um, in film, yeah. And you know what? I don't think if I hadn't gone to Palestine, I don't think I would have been a filmmaker. Like, I think it was really going there and just having the time and the inspiration to sort of figure out how to do it, and having all of these stories like really accessible, and then meeting people, because there's a lot of the people that sort of helped me to teach me how to use a camera, how to edit, like all of those opportunities and stuff. So but I think that, yeah, to like filmmaking is it's not an easy, it's definitely not an easy career choice, and it's there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of hustle. 1 month, you make a great deal of money, and then you won't make money for a month or two after, and you just really have to be okay with like, and good at budgeting, and like sort of good at not knowing necessarily where your next project's coming from.
All these places you've been, I mean, Middle East, Palestine, like those are not easy areas, right? I mean, being born in Canada, having had a certain lifestyle, like how did you feel, being responsible to represent those voices throughout their stories? how you navigated that path of, making sure you're not getting too shaken down for everything that's happening, because those are tough stories right there, right? Like they come right to you. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I mean with Speed Sisters, I had already lived there for like 3 or 4 years, so like it wasn't like I was just like bombing into Palestine and making this story. I was already very quite settled, had, a lot. There's, Speed Sisters specifically, like, and actually all of the films that I try to make is we also have a lot of people from within the community that are advising us and that are working on it, on the project. So with Speed Sisters, like there were so many Palestinians that were working with us as either as translators or as assistant like director's assistants or producing assistants or my associate producer was Palestinian American. We the editor was Palestinian. Like there were so many. It wasn't like I made that film on my own. A film was made by a community of folks that and Palestinian voices were very prominent in making that film. So, you know, um yeah, yeah. I don't think with any film, at any film, like is never, it's a collaboration between the director and the producers and the cinematographer and the editors. Really, the editor for documentary is probably the most important, that relationship. And then, there's also all of the local staff, like local people that are helping you along the way. So, in teaching and educating you. I mean, obviously, like the whole time that I was making that film, I was also learning about Palestine and really experiencing different elements of it through making that film.
how did you choose what stories you want to tell? What's the criteria you use to determine if a story is worth pushing?
Well, I mean, I didn't direct another independent film for a very long time after that, but I was also working as a cinematographer. And so then I was taking, other people would come to me with projects and I would work on those projects. So the next project after that it was a documentary film that was also in Palestine called The Judge, and the director's name was Erica Cohen. And uh, I was like the cinematographer and a co-producer on that film. And that film ended up winning a Peabody Award. It's a great film. It's about the first woman to be appointed to a Sharia court of law. It happened to be in Palestine, and it's sort of following her journey. Um, and then I was like a supervising producer. I was on a Katie Couric documentary series called American Inside Out with Katie Couric, and I was a supervising producer on a episode that was about American Muslims. And then I worked on projects like And She Could Be Next, which was um, also as a cinematographer and sort of field director on that, and it was about women of color who were running in the 2018 elections, and I focused mainly on Rashida Tlaib and in Detroit, but also worked across that film. It followed a bunch of different politicians, so there was just like sort of different stories came up that I was paid to work on, basically, which is like really amazing as a filmmaker, because it's like being a cinematographer, I really love it because you're in the field and you're connecting with people and you have like like you're helping to shape the story, but it's not like you're the director, you're not carrying that story with you. Like you kind of go and you do your thing and then you kind of move on to the next project. And I did that for many years, and that was great for me.
So that said, um, I believe that like you have navigated a lot of roles in the filmmaking industry. Where do you think the industry is going towards? Uh,
Yeah, I
what
don't
are
know.
like the
It's not good right now. I mean, it doesn't feel good. Like, I mean, I think that, you have like a lot of streamers, a lot like nobody really knows what's happening with documentary right now, because it seems like social justice sort of issue-driven documentaries are harder to find sort of distribution and a home beyond, film festivals and then perhaps like VOD. The streamers seem to be very specific in what they're looking for. It's a lot of documentaries by and for famous people. There's a lot of like, cult and sort of true crime sort of series. Like, so it's, I think right now we're at a point in the industry where people are a little bit afraid and not really sure where and what direction it's going. Independent documentary film is very, very difficult right now. There seems to be less funding and less opportunity, and probably in many respects a bigger need given the state of the country and the world.
So the two most impactful movies that uh, I've seen and had like a great deal of, they left like such a good feeling. Like I really empathize with the message behind. They were made by independent filmmakers, and there's no way I can like find it again. I want to recommend it to other friends. I want to like reach out to direct. It's like impossible. It's like one is like a Turkish movie, Cold of Calendar. Like I loved it. It had like a it had, and it was such an amazing story. Like I don't want to make a spoiler for others, but the thing is like there's jewels out there, right? And that's one of the things like is like where's their home? What like you if you have to speak for them, what is there that's missing that you like to see?
I don't know. I don't know. It's like, I mean, the, many of these documentaries have home. It's just that the industry is so like split off, right? There's just so many avenues, so many different platforms, so many. It's like trying to find it is what's difficult, and like, and also even if you can find it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that filmmaker made any money making it. You know what I mean? Like that's like the hard, I think, is, you have to search to find these things because, you know, in general, like I think with everything now, you can't just turn on TV and there's four channels. Now there's like a million different platforms and stuff. So it's like, it's difficult to find things. So I don't know what the, I mean, I don't know what the answer is for that.
Yes, but do you have a good faith about the future? Like, do you think like tech is going to come up with something that will like, we must be optimists,
I
right?
guess,
In
yeah.
some way,
I mean,
Amber?
I don't think it's a tech issue though. Like, I think the technology is there.
Yeah, okay.
It's more of how do you aggregate people, like it's just that people are, there's so many options, social media, like there's just an infinite amount of places that you can go. And how do you point people in that direction? How do you reach people to tell them where to go? I don't think it's a tech issue at all, but it's just the way that the industries are being, the way that the way that industry has gone, that it makes it's I'm sure marketers are having this issue like this problem about everything right now.
So, do you feel like the audience is sometimes more, prone to go scroll on Netflix and just like have time pass by their like,
I have no
watching
I have
and
no
no
idea
notice
what
like,
people's like patterns are. I know for myself it's really made it hard to find, because we can scroll on Netflix and then you're like, oh, nothing's here, and then end up not watching anything. And I feel like it's a waste for me personally to have like subscriptions to all of these different platforms when, you watch one thing once in a while. Like it's not, and until you hear it through pop culture, through like, oh, you have to watch this series or that series, or, I have a friend that made this documentary or that documentary. Like there's usually a reference point. It's very rarely do I ever just like scroll around on Netflix and find something that I like that I love. I usually watch for 10 minutes and go, this isn't great, and move on, right? I think that's a problem too, is like is how do you, there's so much content out there. Is how do you get to the people who, how do you find your audience, I think is really hard. And so I think with things like documentary, the nice thing about it is like, with a lot of these films is that there is an audience, like there is a community, there's communities that you can, and it's not necessarily through marketing, but it's through like impact and engagement, is that you're doing community screenings. You're, if you look at the film Israelism is like a really great example of that. Like those guys really hustled, and really captured, there was a moment where that film really was important, and they really they really capitalized on that. I think they have like 100,000 people that follow them on Instagram, that they're like constantly putting out content. Like they did so many community screenings. They brought that film into so many different spaces, and you know that and the film never had. I think it may have distribution now, but I think it's just on VOD. But like I mean, you know, they did it all themselves. It's a lot of work. Like after, you know, they I think it was 7 years it took them to make that film, to have the energy to be able to do that afterwards. Like that's hard. That's really hard, but it can be done. I think that, you know, when you ask like what the future is, I don't, maybe the future isn't isn't tech actually. Like maybe the future, or maybe it is tech, because there's tech can provide, like, you know, platforms that are really flexible where you can have like, and I think that there's platforms that do that. They have home screenings, or that you can control sort of like these small screenings and stuff like that. But but it may not be through traditional channels of distribution. I think that, you know, I think that that's the way that that independent documentary is going at the moment.
So I think like one of the beautiful things about the internet is like it's just like a tool that connects people and helps them transact and exchange ideas, money, right? And the problem is like when like big conglomerates try to take, you know, too much possession of that and like enforce certain patterns of doing things like that. That's when it loses its whole meaning about what was the internet all about, right? And here's where I'm like very positive about, you know, seeing all these filmmakers like using the power of community or like driven audiences, that like they have the freedom to like express that without being tied to certain platforms, restraints and constraints. And I think like if that happens, then the film will find its audience. You just need to let it travel freely, light and this is what happened, I think, mostly with like the information. I remember that times when the internet changed from linking and positioning links by how you connect your website with others to like more of organic search engine based. And there is still a lot to do, right? But for me, I feel like there's so many amazing films out there that have not yet been exposed to an audience that will die for those, right? And always like it's you're fed with like a particular film that because you watch two, like they create a pattern out of you and like they'll feed you more of that. But I'm tired of more of that. Surprise me, give me something like, you know. And this is where I think like the opportunity comes. Like the audience is like a little more well, I know like by now, you know, like I like this like um, type of romantic movies that Australian farmer like which by the way, like, I found like I like Netflix throws a lot of that lately, which is really funny.
It's funny.
um, but the thing is, you know, you were saying, Amber, you're enjoying like the part of directing. If you have to, you know, help, because I think like there's a lot of people out there trying to shape a story, you know, give a tone to things that are happening out there. What do you think is the best way for them to navigate the complex political and social context of Palestine when they want to go into storytelling? I mean, as an Arab, right?
Oh, geez. I don't, like
Yeah,
as
well,
Arab filmmakers, you mean, or as like anyone that's wanting to make a film about
in
Palestine?
general, you know, about everything that's going on, right? Like, and then beyond that, I think like it's so much about like, hey, like let me tell you what's happening in here.
I think we need to support Palestinian filmmakers. I think Palestinians need to tell their own stories. You know, like I mean, I think, and there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot within the film community that is trying to help elevate Palestinians, to help elevate their. So there's a lot of really great filmmakers in Palestine, and I think that you know, one of the reasons that we are where we are when it comes to Palestine is because Palestinian stories and voices have been muffled throughout history, and Arab voices for that matter. Like everything has been very Orientalist when it comes to the Arab world. And so I think, you know, if you're looking at doing a film about Palestine, you know, and you're a director and you're not Arab and not Palestinian, think about getting a Palestinian co-director with you. Like I feel like, you know, this
I
idea
love what you just said,
of,
actually.
of,
Yeah.
of, you know, Westerners just bombing in and telling these stories is not, I don't know how helpful it is. It is helpful in that, you know, they can access like probably better markets, but I think that, you know, the energy should really be in helping Palestinian voices be heard. And I mean, I've been a part, like I said, I know that there's lots of people out there that are been trying, and have been definitely wanting and doing and doing that and providing like consultation and being invited to like different markets and all of that. Like it's, I think that is happening, and I think we will start to see, we already are. There's at least two films out this in this cycle. One is called Three Promises, and the other one is called A Land of Our Own or something like that, or No Other Land. You know, and they're great films, and they're on the film festival circuit right now, and I think that there'll be plenty more to come.
So I'm gonna go into like a few questions, like to spark a
Sure.
little bit of your experience and everything. What's actually the most impressive location you ever filmed in, like that you were like, wow, like
Standing Rock in North Dakota, because they created an entire community there. They when they were protesting the pipeline, they created this really amazing, beautiful community that where they brought them back to their culture, and it was amazing. It was amazing to witness that and to film there, and to and to be, we were living in, we were like basically camping and like the elements and all of this. It was just, it was really amazing to film there.
if it's not much to ask actually, Amber, because you mentioned this, like, is there any particular memorable or unexpected, I would say, moment in your career as filmmaker and director?
Oh, I don't know.
So
There's so
many.
many. I mean, it's,
I mean, like,
yeah, it's the thing with, with being a filmmaker, especially being a cinematographer and director, as well as like I feel like I'm transported into these like moments of time, like Standing Rock being one of them. I was standing when they had announced that the pipeline had been sort of halted, and there was like, all the elders were walking through and drumming, and the photo that was like, on New York Times, I was standing beside those photographers, so I was right there for that moment. I was with Rashida Tlaib when she won her first when she won her first election. I was with her when she was inaugurated, like shaking hands with Pelosi. Like there's just all these like moments. I feel like that I've like both like historical moments that I've witnessed, and then just really intimate moments between people and stuff that I've been like, very honored that people have trusted me to be there and to tell their story. But I can't think that there's like one specific one that's like that stands out in my mind,
no,
really.
that means like you have plenty, which is good, which is a good, very good sign. I don't want to take more of your time, Amber, because but I will go on and on with a lot of questions. And there's one particular one that I want to close into. I don't know, take too much advantage of your time here. And is there's so many projects you've done, and you mentioned you love the directing part. But is there a dream project you haven't tackled yet, and you could share with us that you might or wish, or maybe one day?
I'd like to get maybe into more narrative storytelling, as writing my own scripts or writing my own stories and directing, opposed to being documentary. I think would be, yeah. I don't know if there's one specific. Every story when I started is a dream story, so you know, I don't have like a specific story in my head at the moment, but I would like to start to explore sort of different ways of different means of storytelling for sure.
Amazing. No, I mean, um, I will tell you like my what I would like to see more, and I was mentioning this before on another conversation I had, that I feel like we all know through storytelling like worst case scenarios of if we do things wrong and we don't behave, or like, yeah, like we all can picture how bad things can go, but it's hard for me to picture if we do things right how well things would go. And it's almost like
So
yeah, like I found like,
more optimism in story in
well, not
documentary.
in documentary, but perhaps like if there is this, if sci-fi could give people both the like bad side of things, because it's all like it's not real. It's not a story necessary like like climate, right? Sci-fi will tell you about the end of the world.
There's a film that just came out actually by a Palestinian filmmaker named Rami Yunus
Lid.
called Lid. That's about a village in Palestine, Israel, Palestine, and he uses sci-fi to say basically say like, you know, if the Israeli occupation hadn't happened, like how could this community have gone and what life could have been like, and I think that you'd find that really interesting.
Thank you. Actually, that's what.
You may want to have him on the podcast as well. He's a
Absolutely.
great
I
guy.
mean, yes, please. So I wanted to ask you, Amber, for like the audience, three films or documentaries that have impacted you the most, that you would like, this is a must watch.
Is it much? Well, the ones that impacted me, I don't know if they're necessarily much what, but there was a film in the 90s, early 2000s called Children of Shatila by a Palestinian filmmaker named May Masri, who is, and that film influenced me to become a filmmaker. It also influenced me to go back to Lebanon, my first trip back to Lebanon when I went. So that one has been a really important film for me. Um, Oh, this question always gets me because there's so many amazing films. There's a film
Sorry.
called Mind the Gap that I really love that was about like sort of abuse within in toxic masculinity told through, you know, these kids that were like skateboarders and stuff. Very personal story. That was a really beautiful documentary. And you know, for films about Palestine, you know, there's so many amazing like Palestinian filmmakers, but there's two sort of narrative filmmakers, Shireen Debus and Anne Marie Jasser that do and both have films that are coming up this next year that I'd say to watch out for. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm sure like the timing of them, they'll be very impactful films. So, you know, I think yeah, I'll leave it at that.
For me, I think this is a very priceless, like, give recommendations and having like a good way of spending your time, and it's the best thing. Like, instead of like scrolling and let's see what Netflix gives me. So I really appreciate Amber. I know like it's a question you won't escape, but if you answer, like, I'm much grateful. So be sure I will be watching all this. Thank you so much, Amber. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
an honor to have you. Very much looking forward what's next on your career, and congratulations for everything you've done so far. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye bye.